Let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're shifting our perspective. When we think of ocean life, it's super easy to immediately picture dolphins jumping through the waves, massive whales breaching, or those bright coral reefs absolutely packed with exotic fish. But right now, we're going to look closer, a lot closer. We're exploring the unseen life that makes all of those bigger creatures possible. We're talking about the true unsung heroes of the aquatic world.
And to really wrap our heads around how important they are, let me ask you something. Where does most of Earth's oxygen actually come from? Now, if you're like most of us, your mind probably goes straight to the Amazon rainforest, right? Vast jungles or those endless leafy woods spanning continents. Which totally makes sense because we see land plants every single day. But the real answer, it's hidden just beneath the ocean's surface, totally invisible to the naked eye.
The answer is phytoplankton. Get this, they produce more than 60% of the oxygen from all plants on Earth. Over 60%. That literally means for every single breath you take, you owe a massive debt of gratitude to these tiny floating marine organisms. And they work a lot like land plants. They've got chlorophyll to soak up sunlight, and they use photosynthesis to turn that light into chemical energy. They pull in carbon dioxide, and in return they release the oxygen that keeps us and pretty much every other animal on the planet alive.
So let's get into part 1, the ocean's invisible engine, meet the plankton.
The word plankton actually comes from a Greek word that means made to wander or drift. And honestly, it's such a deeply poetic, perfect description of what they do. They don't swim against the tide, they just surrender to it, floating along in the surface waters of rivers, lakes, and oceans. And this umbrella term covers both microscopic plants, which we call phytoplankton, and microscopic animals, known as zooplankton. Together, they are the drifters of the deep.
Now, individually, sure, they're microscopic. But when you put them all together, the numbers are absolutely staggering. The total biomass of phytoplankton is many times greater than that of all the plants on land combined. No way, right? But just try to imagine the sheer volume of every tree, every blade of grass, and every shrub across every single continent. These invisible oceanic drifters outweigh them by a massive margin. They effectively serve as the vast, sprawling pasture grounds of the entire aquatic environment.
And this huge mass plays a totally critical role in our global climate. Phytoplankton are responsible for most of the transfer of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere into the ocean. During photosynthesis, they suck up carbon dioxide, and that carbon gets incorporated right into their microscopic bodies. It's the exact same mechanism as carbon getting stored in the heavy wood and broad leaves of a giant oak tree on land, just happening on a microscopic, ocean-wide scale.
But for this massive invisible engine to keep running and thriving, it requires 4 very specific conditions. First off, light, so they are strictly limited to the uppermost layers of the ocean. Second, inorganic nutrients, like nitrogen and phosphorus. Third, temperature and salinity, which dictate their production. But here's the really surprising one. They need trace amounts of iron. Iron is actually so scarce in large areas of the ocean that it acts as a hard limit on how much they can grow. Because they are so picky about these strict requirements, their distribution isn't even across the globe. Phytoplankton concentrations up at high latitudes are 10 to 100 times higher than what you'd find down in the tropics and subtropics. They really thrive in those nutrient-rich, colder waters, or in special upwelling areas along continental shelves.
In this tiny, microscopic engine, it fuels an incredible chain reaction. Phytoplankton sit at the very foundation, as the primary producers. They get grazed on by zooplankton, those microscopic animal drifters, then small fish and invertebrates eat the zooplankton, and finally, those smaller animals become prey for the ocean's apex predators, all the way up to massive whales. Without those tiny drifting plants at step 1, this whole magnificent structure just collapses.
Moving right along to part 2, zooplankton, the vital link, feeding the mangroves.
So zooplankton, which include tiny crustaceans and protozoans, are absolutely essential for nutrient recycling and transferring organic matter from those primary producers up to secondary consumers like fish. And what's incredibly fascinating is their distribution in tropical regions. They are highly concentrated right inside mangrove waterways, way more so than in the adjacent open coastal waters. And because they're so abundant there, they end up feeding a massive proportion of the juvenile fish that use those complex mangrove root systems as a protective nursery.
All right, let's step up in size for part 3, seagrass, the coastal guardians, the shallow water-rooted plants.
Now, seagrasses are marine flowering plants that actually look a lot like the grass on your front lawn, complete with true roots and strap-like leaves. And they are the ultimate coastal guardians. Physically, their sprawling lagoon meadows reduce wave and current energy. They filter out suspended sediments to keep the water clear, and their roots stabilize the bottom sediments to control coastal erosion. Furthermore, they act as massive nutrient sinks, buffering chemical inputs into the marine environment, all while providing incredible habitats for marine invertebrates, fish, and even migratory birds that rely on them for food and shelter.
But sadly, because they require relatively calm, shallow waters with sandy or muddy bottoms, these vital marine flowering plants are right in the crosshairs of human activity. They face severe threats from eutrophication, which is nutrient pollution, as well as siltation. Physical destruction from commercial trawling and coastal engineering constructions are drastically reducing their numbers. It is a really stark reminder of how fragile these essential coastal guardians are when faced with overexploitation.
And that brings us to Part 4, Seaweeds, Multi-Purpose Marine Marvels. The macroscopic algae.
You know, people mix up seagrass and seaweed all the time, but biologically speaking, they are entirely different. Like we just learned, seagrasses are true flowering plants with real root systems. Seaweeds, on the other hand, are technically macroscopic algae. They are thalloid plants, meaning they have no true tissues, no real roots, stems, or leaves. Instead, they just use these leaf-like appendages to attach themselves to rocks, corals, and submerged strata.
You'll find seaweeds heavily populating the intertidal and shallow subtidal zones anywhere there is a sizable substrate to hold on to. Because they are a type of algae, marine biologists broadly classify them based on the color of their pigmentation. So you get these beautiful, distinct varieties of blue-green, green, brown, and red seaweeds painting the shallow, rocky coasts of our oceans.
Beyond being vital breeding grounds and food sources for marine organisms, seaweeds have a wild variety of human uses. They're a staple food for humans and feed for animals, acting as great fertilizers. In medicine, they've been used as drugs to treat intestinal disorders and goiter. Commercially, we extract valuable products like agar-agar, alginates, and iodine from them. And check this out. Through biodegradation, we can use seaweeds to produce economically important gases like methane in large quantities. And certain species even yield extracts with powerful antibacterial properties.
Amazingly, we've also discovered that seaweeds have a unique biological ability to strongly bind and accumulate heavy metals. Because of this, scientists are now utilizing them as natural indicators of pollution in coastal ecosystems. By studying the seaweeds, we can accurately track heavy metal pollution levels in the water, essentially turning this macroscopic algae into an underwater environmental alarm bell.
We've traveled from the microscopic drifters that supply our atmosphere with oxygen and sequester global carbon, to the coastal seagrasses that guard our shorelines, all the way to the macroscopic seaweeds that feed us and monitor our pollution. Knowing that these unsung heroes literally keep our planet breathing and functioning, I want to leave you with a final thought to consider. From the air you breathe to the beautiful coasts you visit, how will your daily actions and choices impact these essential, foundational elements of the ocean? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to keep diving deeper into the wonders of our natural world.